We like to think we're smart. We build homes with steel and wires apps that predict the weather machines that do everything for us. But when the storm hits, things fail. The power goes out, the roof leaks, the heat stops, and yet there are houses built 800 years ago that are still standing, warm, dry, safe, no electricity, no plastic, no emergency number to call. They weren't lucky. They were clever. Because while we were building for comfort, they were building for survival. So ask yourself, what did we lose in the name of progress? What if the smartest systems weren't the newest? What if the things we call primitive were actually brilliant? And what if one man living alone in a forgotten house still remembered them all? Before machines, before manuals, before electricity, people still built homes. They still stayed warm. They still fed entire villages through storms, droughts, and winters that dragged on for months. They didn't have factories. They had forests. They didn't run systems. They lived inside them. Across old Europe, in the hills of Wales, the cliffs of Norway, the flatlands of Poland, families passed down not just stories, but entire survival systems. Some shaped stone by hand. Some bent trees over decades. Some trapped fish by moonlight. And what they built still stands. No backup generator, no repair hotline, just knowledge embedded in clay, smoke, and straw. We don't know most of their names, but their hands are still here in the beams that don't break, and the walls that breathe. Technique 1. Flexible timber frame. In the 1200s, deep in the Jura Mountains of France, a carpenter named Mathis was doing something modern builders still don't fully understand. He wasn't cutting wood. He was growing houses. Instead of chopping trees to fit a design, Mathis shaped the design around the tree. He would find young oaks on the windy slopes, trees already curved by storms and time. Then he'd guide them. He'd tie them gently season after season, teaching them to grow with the bend he needed. When the time came, he didn't slice them into beams. He lifted them whole, each timber flowing from the earth to the roof in one continuous arch. These frames didn't lock up during storms. They flexed. Some could bend nearly 4 inches in strong winds without breaking, without cracking, because the grain wasn't forced. It was followed. Mathis didn't work fast. He worked slow, on purpose. It could take 30 years to grow the right beam. But the result, a home that outlasted empires. Today, we build square boxes from flatboards. We bolt them stiff. We paint them to hide the flaws. Then the first storm comes and they fall apart like wet cardboard. But Mathis's house, it's still standing 700 winters later. No screws, no glue, no concrete, just patience, memory, and curved oak that learned to dance with the wind. We think strength means resisting everything. But real strength, sometimes it means knowing how to give and return. That's what they knew back then. They didn't fight nature. They flowed with it. And somehow, that made everything stronger. Technique 2. Turf roof system. Ingrid could smell the storm hours before it hit. The sky turned heavy, and the goats refused to leave the shelter. She climbed onto the roof, not with fear, but with purpose. This wasn't just a roof. It was a living thing. Years ago, when she and her husband built their home, they didn't lay shingles or tiles. They laid down bark, birch bark, peeled clean and pressed flat. That was the first skin waterproof and tight. Then came layers of soil packed carefully. And finally, the top thick sod, cut from the hillside, laid like green blankets across the house. It looked like a hill, but it worked like armor. When the storm came, rain beat down hard, but nothing leaked. The roots drank in the water. The soil held firm. The roof didn't just survive the storm, it used it. In summer, it stayed cool. In winter, it held the heat like a thick wool hat. And through it all, it grew wildflowers, moss, even herbs that kept bugs away. Today, we build roofs that need replacing every 15 years. We patch leaks by insulation and wonder why the house still sweats in summer and freezes in winter. We fight nature with tar and nails and always lose. But Ingrid didn't fight. She planted. Her roof wasn't perfect, but it got better with time. Stronger, thicker, smarter. That's what we've forgotten. Nature doesn't always need to be blocked. Sometimes it just needs to be guided. They didn't build roofs to last through one storm. They built them to last through generations. And while our shingles peel and crack, hers still bloom every spring. Technique 3. Waddle and daub wall. Edric was a builder in 12th century Yorkshire long before bricks and cement took over the land. And when winter crept into the valley, he didn't panic. He picked up a bundle of hazel rods and started weaving. That's how they built walls back then. No concrete, no screws, no instruction manual, just trees, mud straw, and memory. Edric started by planting upright stakes into the ground. Then he bent thinner branches and wove them in and out tight, even like a basket for the wind. That frame was called the Waddle, flexible, light, and strong. Next came the daub. He mixed clay, chopped straw, animal dung, and water until it turned sticky, almost like bread dough. Then he pressed it in, working it deep into the weave, closing every gap. He let it dry slowly, not in the sun, but in the shade so it wouldn't crack. The wall didn't look like much, but it flexed in the wind. It held heat in winter. It let moisture escape without mold. And if it broke, you didn't need a truck, just a spade and a little time. Modern homes. They're full of plastic-wrapped drywall spray foam, sealed so tight that the air inside feels dead. And when something breaks, good luck fixing it without a contractor. But Edric's wall, it lived. It breathed. It worked with the seasons, not against them. We think strength means hard, stiff, unbending, but nature says otherwise. Edric didn't just build a wall, he built a system, one that understood the weather, the soil, the breath of the valley itself. And that's the beauty of it. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't perfect, but it was enough. And that still matters. Technique 4. Thatch roof engineering. Ilse lived in 13th century Latvia in a village tucked between pine woods and marshland. Her roof leaked only once on her first build. After that, never again, because Ilse had learned one thing. You don't just throw grass on top and call it a roof. You engineer it like a sponge that sheds water. She started by harvesting reeds from the marsh, long, dry, and hollow. Not green grass, not fresh, only stalks that had cured under the sun and crisped in the wind. Then she tied them in tight bundles, each one thick as her wrist. The angle mattered. She laid the bundles steep, almost vertical, so rain would run off fast. Then, one row at a time, she stacked the bundles thick, overlapping them like fish scales. Each layer pushed water downward. Each reed caught and drained. And the thatch, it wasn't just dry, it was thick. 2 feet thick, thicker than most modern insulation. People today hear thatched roof and think poor, fragile, temporary. But Ilse's roof, it lasted 30 years, sometimes more, without a single shingle. It kept the snow out, the cold out, even sound. No nails, no metal, no factory, just wind, water, and wisdom. And if something failed, she didn't climb up with tools, she climbed up with memory. Modern roofs crack, mold, trap heat. Then we spend thousands to fix what nature could have balanced. But Ilse's roof, it was alive. It adapted. It breathed through seasons, never stiff, never stuck. Maybe that's the real lesson. You don't need high-tech to stay dry. You need design that listens to the weather and people who remember how to read the wind. Technique 5. Stone foundation drainage. Håkon was a settler in 11th century coastal Norway, where storms came sideways and the soil never truly dried. He didn't try to fight the water. He let the stones do the talking. When he built his cabin, he didn't start with wood. He started with rock. First, he cleared the topsoil right down to the hard earth. Then he laid fist-sized stones in a wide, even ring, forming a hollow base. Not packed tight space, just enough to let water trickle through. No cement, no mortar, just gravity. Then came the magic. Before placing a single timber, Håkon filled the center with coarse gravel, letting it slope gently toward the edges. Any rain, melt, or ground seepage would sink, slide, and drain, never pooling underfoot. Even in the deepest snowmelt, his floor stayed dry. Modern homes, they sit on poured concrete wrapped in plastic, sealed tight as a jar. But one crack and moisture creeps in, slow, stubborn, destructive. But Håkon's system, it was breathable, flexible, fail-proof. No machines, no chemicals, just smart layering. He didn't call it engineering. He called it survival, because every time it rained and the earth turned to soup, his house stood strong. And that base stone gravel air did more than keep it dry. It kept the rot out. It kept the cold down. It let his timber frame last decades longer. We forget this sometimes. Dryness isn't just comfort, it's preservation. And in places where mold meant death, Håkon didn't build to impress. He built to endure. Technique 6. Roman-style heated flooring. Etienne lived in 12th century southern France near Toulouse, where winters didn't scream, but crept in slow and damp. He wasn't a lord. He didn't build castles. He built warmth from the ground up. Etienne had studied ruins left behind by the Romans. What amazed him wasn't their size, it was their heat. Even the coldest stone floors somehow stayed warm. He noticed the raised foundations, the empty spaces underneath, and the tunnels that once carried heat. So when a wealthy landowner asked for a warm home, Etienne didn't reach for firewood. He reached for memory. He built a shallow crawl space under the house stacked with bricks and supported by small pillars. Then he laid clay tiles above, forming the floor. But the real magic, it flowed below. At one end, Etienne built a small firebox. When lit, the heat traveled through tunnels under the floor before escaping out a chimney at the far end. The floor, warm as a sleeping dog. No smoke, no flames inside the room, just radiant, gentle heat. People today spend fortunes on radiant heating. They call it modern comfort. But Etienne did it with clay fire and Roman memory. The system wasn't fast. It took time, but once heated, the floors stayed warm for hours, even through the night. Most folks thought it was overkill. Etienne thought it was smart because he'd seen what cold floors did to children, to elders, to those already sick. Warmth for him wasn't luxury, it was medicine. Sometimes we think old homes were just drafty and dark, but Etienne's floors, they whispered ancient warmth. And maybe that's the trick. Instead of chasing heat, build it into the bones. Technique 7. Smoke-loft heat capture. Hayins lived in the 14th century deep in the Scottish Highlands where the cold wasn't just sharp, it stayed. She didn't have bricks or chimneys. She had peat smoke and instinct. Inside her longhouse, there was no fireplace like we'd expect today. The fire burned in the center of the room, open to the air. No chimney carried the smoke away. Instead, it rose slow and thick into the rafters. Most folks would choke on that smoke, but not Eyeless. She used it. Above the main room, she built a low loft woven from timber slats and packed with dry moss. As the smoke gathered, it warmed the loft space gently, consistently. The heat got trapped up there, held by layers of moss wool and soot-blackened beams. At night, Eyeless and her children climbed into that loft. It was dark, a little smoky, but warmer than anywhere else in the house. No firewood wasted, no separate room needed, just vertical thinking. Modern houses vent everything out fast and clean, but they also throw heat out with it. We've traded warmth for air quality. Hayins didn't have the luxury. She had to choose what to keep, and what she kept was heat. That old soot-stained loft, it was more than clever, it was survival. And today, scientists studying these homes found something strange. The smoke over time preserved the wood, kept insects away, even waterproofed the thatch. Hayins didn't know the science. She just knew it worked. That's the magic of these old systems. They didn't need blueprints or manuals. They just needed memory and a bit of grit. Because when the nights got long and the frost crept in through the stones, you didn't ask for more fire. You climbed higher, into the warmth. Technique 8. Cob wall thermal mass. Efan lived in the 13th century near Carmarthenshire in Wales, where winters weren't just wet, they were bone deep. Stone was expensive, timber was scarce, but dirt was everywhere. So he built with what the land gave him cob. Not just mud, but a mix of clay, sand, straw, and water stomped by foot until it stuck like dough. A fan would shape each wall by hand. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. The thicker the wall, the better it held heat. 2 feet, sometimes 3. During the day, the cob would soak in warmth, sunlight, fire heat, even the breath of his animals. And by night, that same wall would give it back. Slow and steady like a big earthen battery. No fire all night. No need. The walls remembered. He even carved niches into the cob to hold candles, tools, herbs. The house wasn't just shelter, it was smart. Today, we build homes that lose heat like sieves, then pay to reheat them every hour. But Efan, he built heat into his house. Modern architects now study cob homes from medieval Wales. And guess what? Most are still standing, still warm. Efan didn't go to school for this. He just watched, copied, practiced, like his father, and his father before him. That's what makes these techniques powerful. They weren't inventions. They were memories passed down by hands, not textbooks. And that's the thing about memory, it holds what matters, even in mud. Technique 9. Straw-insulated sleeping platform. Greta lived in the 12th century deep in the Black Forest of southern Germany. Winters there were long, damp, and unforgiving, and sleeping on the floor, that was a recipe for sickness. So, she built up, not with luxury, with straw. Greta stacked bundles of dried straw, tightly packed, tied with hemp cord, and layered a wooden board over the top. That was her bed. Simple, raised, warm. The straw underneath did more than cushion her weight. It trapped heat from her body. It blocked cold air from the stone floor. It let moisture drift away instead of settling in. She even tucked warm stones inside the straw on bitter nights. No mattress, no blanket warm enough. But the straw, it remembered the heat. And in spring, when the bundles were old and flat, she used them in her garden. Composted warmth turned into food. Today we sleep on foam coils and synthetic fill, shipped across oceans, wrapped in plastic, sprayed with chemicals. And yet, many off-grid cabins now return to Greta's trick straw mattresses, raised wooden platforms, breathable beds, because modern materials insulate. But straw, it breathes, it adapts, it lives with you. Greta didn't call herself an engineer, but her home said otherwise. These aren't primitive methods. They're alive, evolving with the seasons, with the people, with the earth beneath them. And when the fire dies down, a bed that holds warmth without power, without wires, might just be the smartest thing we can remember. Technique 10. Clay pot heat storage. Marco lived in the 14th century in the hill country of Tuscany. He made roof tiles and cooking pots for a living, but what he really understood was heat. Every evening before the sun dipped behind the cypress trees, Marco slid 3 clay pots into the hearth, not filled with soup, just empty. As the fire burned down, the clay absorbed the heat, slow, deep, steady. And when the flames faded and the stone walls turned cold, the pots didn't. They held the warmth. Hours after the fire went out, Marco would sit beside them, hands outstretched, eyes half closed, letting the clay do its quiet work. Sometimes he'd wrap one in cloth and place it beneath the bed. No glowing coals, no open flame, just stored heat where it mattered most. And, the next morning, still warm. We think we invented thermal mass, but Marco already knew clay remembers. Today's preppers and off-grid builders still use this trick, placing ceramic bricks or pots in wood stoves to capture and slowly release heat. No power, no fans, just patience. Marco didn't draw blueprints. He paid attention. He learned from the earth, the seasons, the way fire moves. And that simple clay pot, handmade, sun-dried, heat-soaked, was smarter than any gadget he could afford. It didn't beep. It didn't break. It just worked. And when winter crept into his home, Marco didn't fight it with force. He met it with memory. Technique 11. Heat-trapping entryways. In the 13th century, Edith lived alone in a stone cottage near the moors of North Yorkshire. Her husband had passed, her sons moved south for work, but the winters still came year after year, biting and damp. Edith didn't have much, but what she had, she used well. One thing she did, she built a second door. Not a fancy one, just a curtain of woven rushes hung a few feet inside the main entrance. It turned her front doorway into a tiny space, barely enough room to turn around, but it made all the difference. When you opened the main door, the cold couldn't rush straight into the room. The first wave of chill would get caught in the little pocket between doors. The second curtain blocked the draft. And in winter, that mattered. Even now you'll see this trick in modern Arctic homes and passive house designs. They call it an airlock entryway or thermal vestibule. But Edith didn't need those words. She just knew heat was precious and drafts were thieves. She'd sit near the hearth watching the curtain shift when someone came in, not flapping wildly, but gently, like a soft warning. Shut the door fast. The rush curtain wasn't pretty, but it was smart. And warm. Edith didn't build castles. She built warmth, one small barrier at a time. And maybe that's the lesson: you don't always need big solutions, just thoughtful ones. A layer here, a buffer there, and winter doesn't feel quite so cruel. Technique 12. Hay-insulated bed frame. Albrecht was a blacksmith living in 12th century Bavaria near the edge of the forest where pine smoke drifted like breath from the earth. His forge stayed hot, but his bedroom didn't. Winters in the German Highlands were harsh stone floors, drafty walls, and no insulation to speak of. So like many of his neighbors, Albrecht did something clever. He raised his bed, not just to get off the cold ground, but to trap warmth. He built a wooden platform about 2 feet high, then stuffed the hollow space underneath with dried hay and straw. That hay acted like a giant insulating blanket, not just blocking the cold, but storing body heat from the night before. It wasn't fancy, but it worked like a charm. Each night when he lay down on his wool-stuffed mattress, the warmth didn't just come from the blankets above. It rose from below, gently, slowly, like steam from a pot left on a warm stove. Today, science backs this up. Hay traps air, and trapped air holds heat. It's the same reason why sleeping bags use lofted insulation and why campers today sometimes sleep on straw mats. Albrecht didn't know the thermodynamics, but he knew this: the closer you are to cold stone, the faster your bones feel it. He didn't sleep in luxury, he slept in wisdom. And when you think about it, that's survival in a nutshell. Not adding more, just arranging better. Not waiting for rescue, just working with what you have. No heater, no modern foam, just hay, a raised frame, and a blacksmith who understood warmth by feel. Technique 13. Underground cellar warmth buffer. Guillaume lived in 13th century Normandy, not far from the coastal winds that turn the land to ice every winter. He was a farmer by trade, but a survivalist by necessity. His cottage, made of stone and thatch, got bone-chilling cold by December, but underneath it, there was a secret. An earthen cellar, dug by hand, carved into the hillside. At first, it was just for food. Cool in the summer, damp and stable. But when Guillaume noticed that the room above it always felt warmer than the rest of the house, something clicked. The cellar, always hovering around 50 degrees Celsius, acted like a thermal buffer. It stopped the cold from rising. And better yet, the air rising from it was just warm enough to soften the chill. So he improved it. He laid wooden planks between the floor and the cellar airspace, added straw between the boards, and placed a wool rug on top. No insulation, no heater, just layers of smarts. Even at night, while frost clung to the windows, Guillaume's sleeping corner stayed tolerable. He wasn't warm, but he wasn't frozen either. Today, that same principle is used in modern passive houses: thermal mass ground buffering, geothermal insulation. But back then, it was just one man, a shovel, and a little trial and error. The earth doesn't heat fast, but it doesn't cool fast either. And that slow, stubborn warmth might just be the thing that saves you. Guillaume didn't fight winter head-on. He redirected it. He let the land do the heavy lifting. No fan, no furnace, no help. Just a cellar, a bit of straw, and a memory passed down in silence. Technique 14. Heated water, jar at foot of bed. In the 14th century, Elisabetta lived in the foothills of Lombardy, northern Italy. She was a widow with 3 children and no chimney in her stone cottage. Winters bit hard and firewood was always in short supply. But she had clay jars. Each night after dinner, she'd heat water over the small hearth. Not enough to boil, just warm to the touch. Then she'd fill a thick clay jar with the water rapid in a layer of wool and tuck it at the foot of each child's straw bed. It was a simple trick, but it worked. The warmth radiated through the night. It didn't heat the whole room, but it kept their feet, usually the first to freeze, warm enough to sleep through the coldest hours. Archaeologists found jars like these in medieval Lombard homes, often soot-stained at the bottom. Some even had wool remnants still clinging to the edges. These weren't cooking pots. They were survival tools. And what's wild, we still use this trick today, just fancier. Electric heating pads, hot water bottles, same idea, same warmth, same need. Elisabetta didn't invent it, she inherited it. From her mother and her grandmother before that, because even in the Middle Ages, mothers knew warm feet meant sleep. Sleep meant strength. And strength meant making it through one more winter. No central heat, no electric blanket, no second chances. Just warm water, a blanket of wool, and a quiet promise passed down by firelight. They didn't have firewood. They didn't have help. But they had memory. From Stefan's slanted roof in Poland, to Margit's clay pot in Hungary, to Edric's brick bed in England, they all faced the same cold, and not one of them waited for comfort to show up. Instead, they built, they remembered, they shared. Some laid hot stones under blankets, some slept above the goats, some stuffed straw into sleeves, or curled beside ember tins in the dark. It wasn't easy, it wasn't glamorous, but it worked. Every technique you've seen in this story wasn't just survival. It was strategy. It was design. It was love for life, for family, for those who'd come after. And here's the thing, we might need these systems again. Not because we've gone back in time, but because winter doesn't care what year it is. So take a few. Try one. Teach it. You don't need a degree. You just need to remember, no fire, no help, just memory. And if this video lit a spark in you, don't let it go out. Share it, save it, and subscribe if you haven't already. We've got more forgotten systems and more people like Edric, Margit, Stefan, and Toma waiting to be remembered.